Did Jesus Christ morally upgrade the law of Moses? We've been asking that question on the previous two little lessons. We're going to ask it one more time today, and I can't review too much, but the law to love your neighbor as yourself is an old and new covenant law, and it's the highest moral law that relates to how we treat each other. And we find that Jesus's "you have heard it was said, but I say to you" statements, he doesn't always accurately cite the old covenant law as people claim. He often quotes the Pharisees and their twisted teaching that's based on the law of Moses. And Jesus, in all of the corrections, so-called corrections that he gives, actually he is correcting the false teaching of the Pharisees. Why would he ever correct the law of Moses? Why would he ever contradict the law of Moses? Think about that for a second. The scribes and Pharisees were often testing Jesus, to see if he would endorse the law of Moses, not because they decided, and rightfully so, that if he doesn't endorse the law of Moses, if he contradicts the law of Moses, he can't possibly be from God. He can't be the Messiah. And so Jesus said right at the offset at the Sermon on the Mount, "I don't think I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to abolish them. Oh my goodness, I gave the law. I inspired the prophets. That's me speaking through people in the Old Covenant. I didn't come to abolish. I came to fulfill those everything in law and the prophets, not just fulfill the messianic prophecies, no, but to fill to the full people's understanding of the moral and ethical principles, to rightly divide the Word of God, because the scribes and Pharisees had so twisted the Word of God. And it's so obvious in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is correcting the teaching of the scribes and Pharisees. The whole section that starts, that has all those "you have heard it was said, but I say to you," phrases in Matthew chapter 5. It all begins in verse number 20, where Jesus says, "Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter heaven." So naturally, people are thinking, "Oh my goodness, Jesus just said all of our spiritual teachers are going to hell, and if we don't do better than them, we're going to go to hell as well." And so then Jesus begins to specifically talk about where they've got to do better than the scribes and Pharisees. And it's so obvious that at times he is not citing Moses' teaching, or that literally his teaching under the Old Covenant. He's citing the Pharisees' perverted teaching. Sure. In one of the cases, he said, "You have heard it was said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of dismissal." Now, is that honestly, is that what the law of Moses taught? Whoever divorces his wife, make sure you give that certificate. Are you kidding me? No. That the idea of certificate for divorce is found kind of as an incidental thing in part of the law in Deuteronomy chapter 4, the first 4 verses there. You can read it for yourself. But that's not the emphasis at all. But that was the emphasis of the scribes and the Pharisees. And it's very plain that the scribes and Pharisees believed that it was lawful to divorce your wife for any cause at all. That's in the Bible. Read Matthew chapter 19. They came to Jesus and asked him that question. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause at all? Because that's what they believed. And if you study Jewish history at the time, that's what was being taught by the scribes and Pharisees. They had a whole list of things for which it was lawful to divorce your wife, and it was anything. If your wife spoke to another man in public, you can divorce her. If a man saw a woman who was more attractive to him than his wife, he could divorce her lawfully, because that made her indecent in his eyes. And Moses did talk about a man finding an indecency in his wife and divorcing her. So that's where the Pharisees were coming from. Divorce your wife for any cause at all. Easy divorce. Such a lax policy on divorce. You don't even find that with unsaved people. In the world, anywhere. But in Jesus' time, that was the mentality amongst the spiritual leaders of Israel. And so Jesus said, "You guys in your easy divorce thing, whoever divorces her wife, just give her a certificate, divorce for any cause." No way. Read Matthew 19 and see how Jesus corrects that. He says, God never intended anyone to get divorced. It's never been that way from the beginning. The only legitimate reason to get divorced is because of immorality, etc., etc. And so in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says basically that same thing. You divorce your wife for any cause other than immorality, you're committing adultery. And he was jabbing right to them, because these guys did believe that adultery was wrong. Sure. Remember, it was the Pharisees that brought the woman caught in the act of adultery before Jesus and said the law says we ought to stone such a one. So they all knew and preached and believed that adultery was wrong and condemned people who committed adultery. Yet they would divorce their wives for any reason. And she said, that's no different than divorce. And so he's correcting them on that. And he even goes deeper. He says, you know, if you look at a woman to lust for her, you're committing adultery already in your heart. Was that a new standard? Are you kidding me? In the Ten Commandments it says, do not covet your neighbor's wife. Why do men covet their neighbor's wives? Is it because of their cooking ability? No, you're talking about lust there, guys. Come on. Wake up. Job, perhaps the oldest book in the Bible, Job knew lust was wrong. Of course, he said in Job 31, I made a covenant with my eyes that I will not look upon a woman. Because everyone's always known in their conscience that it's wrong to be mentally undressing a woman who's not your wife, lusting after. Everyone's always known that wrong. That's not a new standard. For us to say that Jesus was introducing new standards in the Sermon on the Mount, you'd have to say that lust wasn't wrong under the Old Covenant. That's crazy. Jesus was correcting the scribes and the Pharisees. He said, let me read it to you directly from the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5 and verse number 33. Again, you have heard it was said, the ancients told, you shall not make vows, but you shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it's the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond this is okay. So is this something new? Is telling the truth and letting your yes be yes and your no be no some kind of a new moral under the Old Covenant? And God was okay with people not telling the truth under the Old Covenant? Come on. If you read Matthew chapter 23, starting in verse number 16, you will see a whole list of things that Jesus rebuked the Pharisees and scribes for because of this incredible concoction that they'd come up with, stipulating when you had to tell the truth and when it was okay to lie. Whoever swears by the temple, you don't have to keep your vow then, but if you swear by the gold in the temple, then you have to keep your vow. That's what the Pharisees and scribes were teaching. Jesus corrected that. He rebuked them in Matthew chapter 23, okay? And it's the same thing here, all right? The very end of the Sermon on the Mount, they were amazed, the Bible says, that he was not teaching as their scribes and Pharisees, because he was contradicting their twisted teaching. Okay, we're out of time. I'm sorry for this amount of time that we've had. I don't want to go more than 3 times on little lessons, but you can look up at davidservant.com and search for teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, and I go into this in much greater detail. All right, thanks for joining me for this final special edition of Little Lessons, Florida Beach Sunrise Cold Morning Edition. God bless you.